Hello, everyone, and welcome to another discussion between Mr. LaRouche and the national candidate slate. I have Diane Sayer in the studio today, and we're also joined over Skype video by Rachel Brown in Texas. We have Keisha Rogers, and then together in Washington State, Dave Christie and Bill Roberts, who have been working together there in a series of meetings over the last week. And I'll just say today is May 7th. It's an historic date. Just a few hours ago in Moscow, Vladimir Putin was inaugurated the next president of Russia, despite all efforts to the contrary from the British Empire and other enemies. So this is a very historic date, and we had a lot of shakeups in Europe over the weekend, too. So with that, I'll give it to Lynn.
Now, we have to look at the situation from an international level, even in dealing with politics inside the United States today. The crucial thing is we're now in a countdown in which Obama is, in the United States, is actually pushing the world toward an immediate, within this month, a threat of World War III, thermonuclear warfare. We're starting with nuclear warfare attacks on certain NATO facilities. So the situation is completely changed. There also, of course, are good changes occurring inside our organizing inside the United States. We're improving and tightening up the work, as you know yourselves from what you're doing. But I think the key thing here is to focus on the issue of what is happening in the transatlantic world into Russia and so forth. Because the shock, the NATO shock of the threat to emplace an unacceptable setting for Russia in the coming period, and within this month, it could be that missiles, nuclear missiles, come raining down on NATO installations. And that is one step or a toe twitch from thermonuclear war. Because it's stated, Russia has stated this is their position. As the deadline approaches, Russia has a deadline in which it will destroy any installations which Russia has considered not tolerable. And that is going to go implicitly, as of now, by clockwork. Well, you have to look at this thing more broadly, because you have to look at the French election, which is significant, but it has a lot of confusion in it. You have a situation which is significant in Germany, but a lot of confusion in it. And all of this goes together as one package, including from China through Russia, into Central Europe, into Spain, another way, and Portugal, into North Africa. All of these areas around the world largely are coming to a point of collision within this month. You may call that it may happen or it may not happen. That's why they call it may, right? Because we're in that kind of tension. So you can't look at local U.S. situations as the basis for what you think. What you organize around primarily is correctly has to be our campaigns and these campaigns as such. But the way we think about the campaigns, which is largely a NWAPA-dominated campaign now, NWAPA is the real power here in the terms of the national campaigns. But we have at the same time, you have a crisis in Spain, you have a terrible situation, an accelerating crisis in Greece still, the crisis in Portugal. Britain itself is having a crisis. Germany is having a new kind of crisis of all the series of crises it's had so far. You have, and also the nations of Eastern Europe, such as Czechia, and Poland and Romania, are terrified because they have been told officially by every Russian military official on record that the time that NATO has intended to deposit the completion of its structures, frontier structure, is the point at which the Russian nuclear weapons come storming down on those locations. Now, even though no shooting has actually happened as far as I know so far, but everyone of any consequence in Poland, in Czechia, in Romania, is terrified because they have no control over what's going to happen in their country or to their country. They are simply puppets of NATO, puppets of the British, puppets of Obama. And because our Democratic Party people and others had no brains when they were thinking, you know, you can try to think, but you should bring a brain along somewhere with you. And, I mean, Bill Clinton was an absolutely brainless reaction to the threat to his wife from Obama. Now you have a situation where the citizens out there are beginning to think in the U.S. and come alive because they realize what bums and failures their so-called leaders are. And we're finding now a growth of support for what we're doing. We also, as you know, are doing much better in the way we organize our campaigns now. The fact that a couple of people left the organization forced us to reorganize ourselves and clean the act up a bit. And we also have moved in the past week in particular to a much better coordination of the entire campaign effort. And this is showing, it may be a little bit late for us, but that's nonetheless it's showing, and it's good. But what we've got now is you've got a situation where there is actually some motion from within the U.S. citizenry toward a serious response to what we're doing. And part of it comes from, I think there are two things that are leading. First of all, the citizen realizes that neither party is any damn good. That's what's a point. So it's hard for you to be boosted within a party when the party is not with you. I mean, it's like running naked, you know, into a you don't have any clothes to wear. You're out there naked in the cold, and therefore you shiver and you don't function too well because you don't have a party anymore. You have a party with a name of a party. You organize around the name of the party. You find an increasing response from what was the party. It is slowly accelerating, but it's there, and it will probably improve greatly in the coming week, right now. But in the center of the case is that we're on the verge of a nuclear war in Europe between Russia, backed by China in a sense, a significant sense, versus Europe, the rest of Europe. And we have the greatest crash, financial crash, economic disaster in modern history, which is largely worldwide, but especially in transatlantic regions. And this showdown, which is coming now this month, between Obama and the British on the one side and Russia on the other side, is a nuclear war. And it already has a definite date assigned to it. Obama has responded and said he's not going to do anything about it. He's just going to go ahead with the regular schedule. But in between the time of the end of the election, which he's talking about, and the bombs will already fall. The nuclear war will have begun. And the president's not going to do anything to change his schedule, and his schedule demands that the Russians drop the nuclear weapons on the frontier system of Europe. So therefore, you can't really talk about the United States without thinking about the world. Because China is involved in this in a big way, in the general warfare. The President of the United States is pushing for a deadline for that war. The deadline is the time that the bombs, Russian bombs, drop on these forbidden areas in Eastern Europe. So you've got a date with destiny. Obama's given you that date. And therefore, everything you're going to think about the United States is, as of this point, number one, is concentrated on the conflict with Russia and NATO. The consequence of the conflict with NATO and Russia means a potential threat, almost certain threat, of thermonuclear warfare globally. And therefore, instead of talking about issues, you have to think about the United States, but don't think about the United States in terms of particular issues in the United States. You have to think about the United States in terms of the global issue first, and every other issue is secondary. But now you have to situate how you act on these secondary issues. It has to be shaped by the way you're going to think about the main issue, which is 2 steps toward hell. Number one, Obama sticks to his agreement with himself that he's not going to do anything about this barrier, this defense position in Eastern Europe until after the election, months later than the deadline. And they're saying no. But while the people in Eastern Europe are terrified, and the rest of Europe's going to be significantly terrified, then the situation, now comes the situation in Greece, which is your problem now. Because what happens in Greece is one of the triggers that's going to determine what's going to happen in the United States. The collapse of Spain, which is a collapse, is also coming up. The problem of Portugal is prominent, but it's a smaller country. Ireland's also in an additional crisis. So that you cannot think in terms of local issues in any sense, or simply a blanket global issue. You have to think of the interrelationship between the local national issues, and they are local issues. And what the global issue is first of all, the showdown in Europe on NATO, and secondly, the consequence of a showdown in Europe on NATO in terms of global thermonuclear war. Those are the factors which are outlined, and any discussion and switch to a different issue than those issues is a mistake. It's a question of how you think about and how you act about and react to the global issue that you're capable of reacting inside the United States or within the state on local issues. The local issues are nothing but a subordinate feature of the decisive issues which center on this global nuclear thermonuclear situation, where the first stage of the nuclear situation for NATO is coming up within the month, with a date certain given by both Russia on the one side and Obama on the other side. So therefore, our thinking has to, in a sense, grow up to a higher level. We have to think, obviously, of the situation in the United States, in the various states, but we have to think about those things from a higher standpoint, which is the global standpoint. Because there's no decision that can be made or even competently proposed on any lesser basis of this particular kind of global situation.
Well, your reference of these nations, of Poland, Lithuania, I was just thinking of that and what your wife, Helga, had said a couple of weeks ago, which is that her sense is very much that we're in a moment like August of 1989, where, I mean, it's just extremely pregnant with some major shift must occur. And I was thinking how inspired we were, because at that time I was a fairly new organizer, but I was lucky enough to be politically active during that time, and how inspired we were by these nonviolent movements where you had Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, you had street musicians out in the public square inspiring people, and of course they had sent you off to prison to prevent the great potential collaboration between East and West, but nonetheless you and Helga collaborated, the triangle. I mean, it was such an incredible moment, and you had this Maggie Thatcher, Bush Sr. collaboration to start the war in the Balkans, the first Iraq war, to sabotage that, and now, in a sense, it's much bigger, and what both of you had warned at the time was that the collapse of the communist system did not mean the success of the British free market system. So now we really are at that point, and in a sense, I think the Americans are going to have to play the leading role in coming to their senses
I think what you said, I have to say something more on this subject because you present it. The interesting situation, I had in my lifetime, I've had a number of significant things, which in terms of my activities were significant and important. For example, as a consultant in forecasting and economic forecasting, I was in a fairly high rank of functioning, and in other respects. But then in 1971, exactly in December, what happened that summer, you had a breakdown crisis of the present U.S. economy in its form at that time. And I was the only economist who had actually forecast this thing and warned against it. All the other economists had said it couldn't happen. They said the built-in stabilizers would prevent a crash from happening. And I had been saying since 1966 that we are in a period where we have to expect, as soon as the right error is made, and I actually increased that intensity after the killing of Bobby Kennedy. I said it's going to come soon. And since it's a willful decision on the part of the government as to when it will come, I couldn't tell exactly what date, but I knew exactly what the crisis was going to be and how it would come into being. So this caused a great commotion because I'd been the only leading economist in the United States who had actually not gone the other way. So they had a big conference, or fairly big conference, they finally organized on the 2nd of December of 71. This is after months had passed. They were getting really upset about the fact I was rubbing it in that I had forecast what had happened, and they had all denied that it could happen. So that didn't make them feel good at all. So, but from that point on, I was a marked person, because when you defeat the enemy marks you for something nasty. Then I went in, the second thing I did was my presidential campaign. And what that did really got them stirred up because I blew the whistle on what the intent was for a thermonuclear confrontation between the United States and the Soviet Union. And that didn't make me popular. I responded to this situation in 1977 by another step, which was to begin to organize a strategic ballistic missile defense of the United States, but doing it in the sense of a cooperation with Russia and others. I organized during that period leading people in Germany, largely in the military and related areas, in the French sector, largely with the former Gaullists, who are now mostly dead, as I should be, I suppose, and so forth. And that was another blow. I organized the SDI. It was my creation. And we organized my creation. And the President of the United States sponsored it. And the British did everything to prevent it. And I said, if we don't do it, we're in hell. That's 1983. And then they said, I was getting too dangerous for them. So in 1986, they said, we're going to eliminate me and everybody around me. And that happened. A great elimination happened. People were terrified what was done to them. Some of you have no idea what was done to our associates during that period. And some of them turned into skunks, just out of the fact of the capitulation to sheer terror. And now we've come to the point that the whole world system is coming apart. The system as we have known it, the world system as we know it, is now ending. And what I've been doing on this thing is the only thing that's going to work. All these other ideas, Obama is nothing. Yes, he's a big nuisance. He's president, but he's incompetent. He has nothing positive about him. He's evil. And you find in Europe, the entire European system, from Central, Western Europe, is collapsing. Russia is better shape than Europe right now, Western Europe now. China is in a sense, has problems as Russia has problems. But compared to Russia and China, for example, the United States and Western Europe are a disaster area, to say nothing of what's happened to Africa and other things. This is the area where I've been in. And you have to understand that what will happen is that these guys, who've been my traditional enemy, shall we say, the accumulated type of enemy, are more concerned about me than you probably could even begin to imagine. Because I have a record going back from my first forecast in 1954, a record which is, I think, enviable in terms of its accuracy for my forecasting and orientation. Over this period, I've had increasing problems, beginning with the results of my first forecasting. When it became successful, I was a menace. 1970, but then 1971, I became considered a real menace. And therefore, I have a responsibility as well as capabilities and a history to go. I'm getting a bit old now, you know. But apart from that, where I'm a factor in history. And the general way we're attacked, and you're attacked for me, is to try to deny that while demonstrating that they believe quite the contrary, that they believe I am one of their leading problems, as they do today, right now. There's still, the Obama administration has been running operations against me for years, especially since 1989. And they will still run them now. They still are running them now. So you have to understand that I'm a bellwether of the fate of all of you and fate of all of us. Because what's happening to you is something which is also happening to me. And the correlation is knowable, but most people don't really understand it. They don't realize what level the counter operations against my work are. And they don't understand how deeply impassioned the current president of the United States is to try to have me eliminated now, and he has me on his schedule for elimination now. And that's the nature of the situation we're in. We have this world situation. The world situation is like a stove heating up, and everything in or on the stove is getting cooked. And that's the fight we have to face in our organization, and this is the fight that the rest of the U.S. population has to face too. Because what is happening around me is not just my fate, it's theirs as well. Probably even more so. Because for me, I know it's coming. For them, they're trying hard to believe that it couldn't come, but it's coming on fast. And therefore, we have to approach these matters with that spirit and not try to explain things away with some simple offhand hand-waving gesture.
And I think it's the case that what we're seeing with the escalations of the attacks against our campaigns, against our candidacies, especially with me here in Texas, the recent malicious attacks that are going on to the extent of excitement of violence. This is not just dirty politics and dirty tricks operations that we're seeing coming from local politicians. This is a direct targeting of Obama and the British Empire because they know what we represented. As you said, once you incite a victory against this empire, they're going to come after you with everything they have. And we're seeing that with my campaign here in Texas and also with the other members of the Slate. But I think in order to understand what we're up against, it's very essential to understand what is happening with this international picture. The fact, as you said, that the whole system of the British Empire is coming down. We're on the verge of thermonuclear war, and the American people know that. And they understand that there is an American revolution that is erupting internationally that they have to take part in. And that's why the responses that we're getting from the American people right now are from the standpoint that they have to fight with all that they have to save their lives. Because this is not just political game here. This is not just dirty politics. What we're talking about is the fact that the international situation in which we're seeing unfold is a reflection of the fact that everything we've been saying is right, that Obama and his British backers are going for a destruction of civilization.
That's precisely the case.
just to reiterate on the question of what you had said, Lynn, on this being your time. It was said once long ago, I believe, by Henry Kissinger, that when the system crashed, if LaRouche was around, then he could take over, something to that effect. And it's very apparent now what you're seeing. Like, for example, the coincidence of the incoming Putin administration and some of the circles that are around him being some of the very same people contributing to this, or this Terra America series on your life, on the Strategic Defense Initiative, and so on, this three-part series, that it's where you see the motion away from this failed imperial system. As Bill and I were talking about it this weekend in our conference, it was the two-headed hydra of monetarism and environmentalism. And we see that the nations who are breaking with that, where everything that Russia has put on the table for the war avoidance policy is your platform. The Bering Straits tunnel, the strategic defense of the earth policy. So it's very clear that you are in the center of this. And I think that in our organizing, what often people respond to in terms of the institutions is we are bringing to the table the international strategic perspective. And it's not from some academic standpoint, it's that we are in the middle of shaping this. And so I think that they appreciate that vantage point because it's just so lacking in politics as usual. And they have this sense that they can't do anything about it, it's too big, it's over their head, and we come in and have a very clear outline of what to do about it, and that's where we get the kind of response where they, at least listen, and some are now beginning to move, seeing that we have the only policy that will work.
And in addition to what Keisha brought up earlier, you're getting these attacks on your campaign, but you reported that the people at the meeting where there's a leaflet being distributed to stop Keisha, that no one at the meeting believes anything in the leaflet. So there is, what we have right now is we have the population behind us. This is what a lot of the wrong side of the institutional powers don't understand, is that the population is ready to hear what we have to say, and the fact that it's not a small issue, it is a complete collapse of civilization. That's what we've been getting a response on in our organizing, is a complete fear of both campaigns. I have not found hardly anybody that thinks that that thinks our nation's going to be any better under Mitt Romney. So the question of the timeline being much faster than that is something that people really can get, that it's not a normal election situation right now. It's a complete breakdown. And this situation around Russia, we've been finding in the field that is helping people see it in the global context, is the fact that there's a direct confrontation between Russia and these European powers that's playing out right now, that is communicating to people the urgency of the situation. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true, because if you take Makarov's statement, the chief of the general staff of the Russian armed forces, that they're putting on the table a strike, preemptive strike against this NATO missile shield. What it makes very clear is that unless you have a war avoidance policy, unless you have a war avoidance policy which consists of a commitment to progress, the type of progress in which it becomes very clear to nations where their strategic interest lies in collaboration on mutual projects of mutual benefit that are universally good, that until you have that, that you don't have a way of avoiding the ability to have the extermination of mankind. It's either you have a several generations long policy commitment to something that's universally good for mankind, or we're in a period in which the existence of an oligarchy that can use Obama, can use leaders, can use nations against one another is going to exterminate us, is going to drag us into hell. And I think the acceleration of this conflict should be used as absolutely as a window to spark a capacity within the population's mind to fight now and not wait, but fight immediately around a long-ranging revolutionary break with kind of the practical politics.
Well, actually, what Bill was just saying on the question of the war avoidance policy is actually that nations working to the advantage of the other. I mean, this was the whole point of the Treaty of Westphalia, which Blair and the British explicitly attack. This is what Samantha Power and this whole Atrocities Prevention Board is just the next phase of the responsibility to protect doctrine that effectively was initiated by Blair, which is that we're going to go in, we determine which leadership and who we fight wars against. We don't have to, Obama doesn't have to go to Congress now. And, to me, going back to your April 11th webcast, Lynn, of 2009, where you put it on the table around these behaviorists, which, Samantha Power's husband is this guy, Cass Sunstein, who now we've just got this document that's been released where we find out they're preparing these facilities to re-educate the political dissidents that believe in conspiracy theories. But what you had said then was that these guys were fascists. And I always, you look at Cass Sunstein, and the guy is just such a dweeb. It's a little, you can't really imagine him with jackboots on or something. But then look at their policy. And, I think one of the things that's very clear to me is that because a lot of this crowd, like you look at Cass Sunstein, the groupings that he runs with, frankly, even a lot of this, the way that they're running these operations, right? Because it's all about infiltrating groups, using social media and this. But you look at where the social networking stuff comes from, and you look at the old cybernetics grouping, they don't actually believe in human creativity. They don't actually believe in a concept of self-governance. That the human mind is that we as a people are creative enough and could actually have self-government. And so you see that those people with that viewpoint of what the cybernetics doctrine is, the belief in the second law and all this, leads them to a fascist mentality where they don't believe in self-governance, but they're willing to impose rule. As we see with these guys, with the political re-education camp, and so on. So
you saw that case that was put up with Sunstein and in Chicago, where he denied when the quotation was read to him by a critic from the audience. He denied what actually he's been publishing for years, and said he doesn't know anything about it. It's not true. And then he had his man protect him so he could squirm out of the thing, and he was hounded by somebody coming up after him and asking the indecent question, why don't you tell the truth? And this is their mentality. But that's what they do. They bully people who are stupid enough to listen to them and tell them that, God is Obama, in effect, that Obama tells them what the truth is and what is not the truth, and they are supposed to believe that. They're supposed to believe it sight unseen because Obama said it. They have it. They don't say it's Obama, though we know Sunstein is Obama, always has been. But they say, well, you didn't listen to the right sources. or you're not paying attention to the right sources. And they're lying their heads off all the way. But the point is, people are, if they're terrified, two things. People are either terrified and therefore will go with these guys because they're frightened. Yeah. Or they believe that there's some bonanza out there waiting as a reward for them if they kindly will go along with Obama. And we've had that around our own organization. And we do know what to a great degree, the Obama operation is doing against us. And I know, personally what they're doing against me. I know it very well. And it's Obama. It's all centered on Obama, and some things part of it. And Samantha Powers, of course, is married to him, or they're attached in some way. Biologically, I'm not quite sure how the attachment works, but we'll leave that for some other times.
Well, part of the problem they have is that belief in Obama may prevent one from surviving. And now that there's a collision course, which I saw at this conference in New Jersey, which I attended about the floods. And they've had the biggest flood prior to Hurricane Irene was in 1903. They've had 8 major floods in the last century. 5 of the 8 have been in the last 6 years. So everyone admits, okay, it's very likely we're going to have another flood really soon, but you can't do anything about it. And you have a population who is furious, saying how many times we had to pay $80,000 to repair our house 1 year ago, then we had to do it a second year, then we had to do it a third year. We can't keep doing this. Some of them get tricked and suckered because they're saying, well, why don't you just buy our house from us and let our whole neighborhood become a swamp, restore it to nature, it'll be a wetland, and give us some money. That's one of the tricks. But the other is that the population just says, no way. And then they actually showed in 1931, one plan was a whole series of reservoirs, any combination of which would have stopped the flooding, which they never built. And then there's a tunnel proposal designed by the Army Corps of Engineers since the 60s, which also looks quite reasonable. It's a big project which would work. That was not even mentioned. And it is spectacular because you have a panel of so-called experts standing up there telling hundreds of people that they should simply drop dead.
Well, that's the ideology. I mean, today, not only was it the inauguration of Putin, but today was also the release of this Club of Rome 40-year anniversary report. And this is coming in the context of the Royal Society, of Paul Ehrlich, of several other, the World Wildlife Foundation, all saying exactly this, that we need to reduce the population of the world by over 5 billion people. I mean, this is the kind of stuff, if you were, as you said, Lynn, caught saying this kind of trash in 1945, you probably would have been immediately dragged right in front of the Nuremberg Tribunal. But that's the ideology, and I think that's expressed in that situation that you mentioned.
What you just mentioned is what this means is development. Development solves this problem. And ever since Teddy Roosevelt managed to succeed in replacing an conveniently assassinated president, which is how he got to be president, we have always had a policy of destruction of the development of the nation. And you look at the history of the western lands between the coastal area and the Mississippi field around there, that area has never been developed. And everything has been put in there, and also in Canada too, by the British monarchy, to prevent the development of water management and other these kinds of projects of management. That's why they hate NWAPA. Mm-hmm. They hate NWAPA. And NWAPA is the only thing that will really save the United States right now. Right. In a term of medium to long-term effect.
No, NWAPA is like garlic and a cross in front of a vampire. I mean, I literally tried to hand the report to one of the panelists, and he recoiled. I mean, like it was going to kill him to take this report. So it's true.
But from the standpoint of planetary defense, I think what you just put out, Len, in response to the Terra America, in response to the Russians, where it is this cooperation around development which is the opposing factor against this British Empire. And what you put forth in a beautiful explanation and in defense, or should I say, our USA Today, really gets at the question of the two opposing views of mankind, this nature of development of the creative, productive powers of man through development, which is our American system, versus that of the British Empire, which is an expression of, just as Matt brought forward, what the Club of Rome, what Paul Ehrlich, the World Wildlife Fund, the elimination or the depopulation of billions of people on the planet. That's what people don't understand, is that the two opposing factions of mankind are at a toe-to-toe war against each other right now. And the question is now, which direction is mankind going to take? Are we going to go in the direction of human progress, of cooperation among sovereign nation states, of the common aims and goals of mankind, as Russia's actually proposing? Russia, with the strategic defense of the earth, modeled on your SDI, they're saying, look, we don't have to, as Makarov and Putin and others are saying in Russia, we don't have to go this route. We don't have to take the direction of, wiping each other off the face of the planet. We know this doesn't work. It's not the direction we should go in. They know that we should go with a planetary defense, that we should be actually cooperating. But is that going to happen? Not as long as the American people don't fight to get Obama out. And I think that what you have put forward as the clear direction that we can take, and why our emergency resolution that we're putting forth all over the country, the emergency resolution of Glass-Steagall National Banking and NWAPA, is so important, because this is not just, another resolution to get people to support something. This is what is going to make the understanding of the population that this is their last chance to fight. This is their chance that we can get rid of and destroy this British Empire once and for all, and we can take the nation back into what the intention of our U.S. Republic actually represented, what the U.S. Republic represented under the American Constitution, under Hamilton, under Lincoln, and Franklin Roosevelt and others. And so it's very clear, it should be very clear to the population, and this is what we have to get people to understand, that these two opposing factions are right now at a head, and we have to decide the direction that civilization is going to go in.
Precisely.
And the time is very short. I mean, the date is set. The NATO summit is happening in Chicago on May 20th. And it's at that summit which the Obama crowd is intending to take the first step with the anti-missile systems in Eastern Europe. And that's what Makarov and Patrushev and others at this event in Moscow last week said, look, that's what we cannot allow to happen. And we will go for preemptive strikes. So we're dealing with days and weeks.
It's a date certain kind of condition.
Yeah.
On that date, the bombs, atom weapons, atomic weapons, fall on the target area of NATO, the frontier. That then sets something else into motion. But this is right now date certain. And Obama has asserted that. He said it publicly, that he's not going to deal with the protests of Russia against this installation until after the election. Now this is May, and this is the month in which the nuclear war is supposed to break out, according to the orders of Obama. And I don't think that you can have a nuclear war on the frontier of NATO and not expect a thermonuclear war to get mixed in with it. And that's the situation we're in right now. I tell you, one thing is obvious in Europe. We just got some intimations of it, but it's obvious. You can imagine what's happening in Lithuania, what's happening in Poland, what's happening in Czechia, what's happening also there in other parts, adjoining parts, as well as those which are directly in the line. Mm-hmm. And we've got a date certain. A date certain is now, the date certain specified as the date the Russians have defined. And that's the date certain for nuclear war, unless something changes. And Obama, who's been confronted by this date system, says, no, we're going to do it. We're going to rum it down your butt. And when that's going to happen, it's going to happen next November. When's the war going to start? In the end of May. And these are nuclear weapons and lead to thermonuclear weapons. That's the fact. And that's the fact that's got to be presented very directly and clearly. And watch out for people who say, no, that's not true. It's not that serious. It won't really happen that way. They'll figure something out. That kind of line. When you hear that line, you know, uh-oh, somebody's been praying into a toilet or something instead of a prayer book or something. But that's where we stand.
Well, just to reference that, Lynn, what Dempsey had said in the speech on he brought up Thucydides and the fact that here you have the rise of China, and you know, he basically referenced that this is what's causing this kind of confrontation, and then also, well, just the work that he had been doing, referencing the work that of Benny Gantz in Israel, who's part of the head of the Israeli military, who's also as part of this war avoidance policy, but. Again, just to reference the fact that what you've said is that these guys are up against the limit of what they can do to hold this thing off. And that it just for all of these political layers, the Clinton circles, Bill himself, who have said, no, we can't do anything about it, they're the ones that have to move on this. And we do what we will do, which is to mobilize the American people. Actually, doesn't take much mobilizing at this point to show people, or you know, that people know Obama needs to be thrown out. But it's again this question of demoralization, where they say, well, there's nothing you can do, throw their hands up in the air and just go crawl in a hole. Frankly, is what Bill Clinton did. So these guys are the ones that have to move now.
Absolutely,
the military's done what they can do.
The problem we've got is. You get people who are spreading lies about this. I mean, they can get it on direct statements, like a direct quote from the President of the United States, who says he's not going to change the NATO decision and not going to consider it until after the election. Huh? The date certain is this month. When as the President has said, he's pushing this thing through on schedule. That means we're looking at a nuclear warfare on this border area this month. So the question, these very precise time settings tell us a great deal about the mentality of people inside the United States, because right now, anyone who pays attention to the television reports and things like that of any significant or press now, knows that these dates exist, and know that the President of the United States has said he's defying Russia on this issue, which means that on the scheduled date that NATO starts to try to push this thing in within this month of May, there's a nuclear attack on those territories. And a nuclear defeat of NATO virtually means the certainty of an immediately consequent thermonuclear war globally. So the date certain factor here, while there can be changes in that still, if the changes don't occur, then the date certain factor is the story. And already, people in Eastern Europe who are in this territory are getting very, very upset about this. And it's the more that people understand this and don't let themselves get fooled, oh, it's not going to happen, oh, it's not going to happen, oh, it's not going to happen, that kind of tomfoolery, are the ones who bring death upon themselves. This is date certain right now. The dates may be changed, but as of now, they are date certains. That is, the relevant parties have each stated their absolute commitment to these circumstances. So if you want to assume that those circumstances are not applicable, you have to be some kind of an idiot. And the guy to remember is Tony Blair. To understand this warfare, do not look at Obama. Obama's a psychotic. He's a Nero mentality. He is not the controller in this process. Obama, is controlled strategically by Tony Blair, the guy who started the war in Iraq, the second war in Iraq, on the basis of alleging that Obama had these secret weapons. The evidence was no such weapons existed. All the international experts said they didn't exist. And such weapons were never seen in the entire war. That's war in Iraq. Never seen. Where were they hiding them? In somebody's dreams? But you had a death of a key intelligence figure, a British figure who was murdered, and we had the whole thing was done by Tony Blair. And everything about that incident, which I was involved in part of the discussions, every part of that incident is exactly what we said. Tony Blair is the key guy in this operation. He was then, he had been then, he is still today. It is Tony Blair who was rushed into the United States to tool up Obama for this phase of the operation. Mm-hmm. This is a British operation, not an American operation. But it's hard to tell the difference between a Wall Street whore and a British whore. But it's actually the British whores that get the money.
Now, when we saw this wild story, too, when Blair was in the United States, he met with not only Obama, but I think he met with John Kerry directly. And John Kerry was at a speaking engagement at UMass Lowell and was called out of the speaking engagement twice because he had a telephone call. And according to news reporters, they overheard John Kerry's staffer saying, "Yes, Your Majesty, yes, Your Majesty, yes, Your Majesty," on the telephone. So if people doubt that the orders are coming directly from the top.
I guess Her Majesty is not as majestic as she would like to pretend she is. She's more of a twerp. A nasty little twerp who'll poison all the chickens the neighbors roost. Anyway. Such is life. We try to improve it.
We try to keep it.
Ah, yes. Good.
Okay. That brings the conclusion. Thank you for joining us, and tune in next week.